All right, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. This is a new thing that the Student Senate is starting. We're just going to do some podcast series throughout the year, and for our first one, we'll be talking about graduate assistant positions. And with us today, we have Lucas Dargo to talk about his experience with graduate assistant positions and kind of the recommendations he can give for future students as they work through that process. Thanks for being with us today, Lucas.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Could you just start off by giving us a little bit of background on kind of your career so far, and then how you've been involved in the graduate assistant process before?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first off, I want to thank you all for having me on here, and especially Connor. Thanks for thinking of me for this. Back in 2013 is when I graduated from undergrad at Ball State. I received my undergraduate degree in athletic training, but I also majored in health education. So I thought that I wanted to be a high school teacher and an athletic trainer at the high school, and that's kind of the career path that I took on. And so I went to Ohio University for graduate school. That's where I eventually ended up, but we'll definitely talk about the process of ending up there. And then also, so I graduated in 2014 from Ohio, and now I'm a doctorate in athletic training student at Indiana State University. I'm a member of the second year cohort, so we actually are going to graduate next year in May. So that was a process in itself. I tried to discover, do I want to get an EDD? Do I want my PhD or DAT? So there was definitely a lot of soul searching, trying to go into what direction I want to go. So I'll just kind of keep it at that. And I'll mention that I am no longer working in the high school setting. I'm currently working as a contractor. So I work for ATI Worksite Solutions, but I actually am contracted to Eli Lilly and Company, and I work in the active pharmaceutical ingredient division there. So I work with about 700 employees. They range in age between 18, and my oldest one that I know of is 74 years old. So very large gap, and I work a little bit between manufacturing. So our department is the one that actually makes insulin. We actually start the process from its beginning, and then we push it on out to kind of down the line, so to speak. So I work with the warehouse where we have individuals that are taking that off the truck, and then office workers, and then all the way through the people that are actually mixing the batches to make the insulin. So a lot of different varies. So it's definitely different, but I'll make some similarity comparisons probably as we go along.
I think it'll be a great thing for all the students out there listening that you've kind of been through the interview process for graduate school a couple times, so you can provide a couple different perspectives for that. I'd like to start with your time at OU and that process first. If you could just kind of tell us about the interview process. Actually, we can back up a little bit and even start with while you were still in undergrad and kind of when you started looking at positions, how you came across those positions, if you have any recommendations on how many students should apply for, and then kind of what to expect from there.
Sure, absolutely. So the first thing that I want to mention is the fact that I knew I wanted to go and get my master's pretty much from the beginning of being on the Student Senate. So we're exposed in the Student Senate to so many different opportunities, and I really feel like as an athletic trainer, we have a lot of mixed messages. Some people say that you should get your master's degree in something completely different than what your undergraduate degree is. And so for those of you that have your bachelor's degree and you feel like maybe athletic training isn't for you, this process might look completely different. So you might be one of those people that you're looking at PA school or PT school. But I really do feel like the advice that I have for you is just as accurate and precise for what your career path is for those that want to go into a post-professional. Because what it comes down to is that you want to look for a place that you feel like you're at home. You have to feel like the faculty there at that university is going to help you put yourself and define yourself as a unique professional. And that starts from the application process. And so I actually applied to Old Dominion, it was Ohio, and then Tennessee. I had my application for Auburn. I did not send it in because I also met my wife now. I was literally getting ready to push all these other schools out because I was going to apply for probably 5 or 6 different ones just because I wanted to give myself options. I still wasn't specifically for sure. But then as I met my wife, I realized I probably didn't want to go quite as far away as what I thought I did too. So that's another completely different aspect I can talk about too with the family you have to consider in there as well. But also applied to, it was the University of Tennessee and then West Virginia. And so I actually had offers from West Virginia, Ohio, and then Old Dominion. I kind of knew as I got there, it just wasn't the place for me. And so that's kind of where I ended up. So Connor, what do you want me to talk about next specifically?
Can you just kind of touch on how you evaluate the type of program they have? What if you know ahead of time about the assistantship positions, like what kind of things to look for? And then I know you mentioned it has to feel like it's like a home or like a welcoming environment. And then anything else you might have as insight into choosing that right place.
Absolutely. Well, what I did is that I actually created a Word document because I wanted to be able to do almost like a pros and cons list, but it was a little bit more detailed in my opinion, where it wasn't just a pro and con, but it was just about the true facts about the location. So how far away is that from home? How far is that from where your family is? Because you're wanting to probably go back and see them sometimes, or maybe they're wanting to come see you. So that's probably something that I would recommend is if there's, if people that you know that you're wanting to see and wanting to stay in touch with, because some places are 1-year programs, like where I went in Ohio, and most places are actually 2 years. So I would say that that's probably a good place to start, is where are all the different schools that you're interested in and they have the program that you're interested in, and how far away is that from your current location? And then I think that it's important to consider what type of program that you want to be in. And so I knew I wanted to expand my thoughts and my professional career path as an athletic trainer. So I started looking specifically at programs that were post-professional, and I knew because I'd been to Ohio a couple of times, great school, and so I think using past experiences that either you have or your preceptors, and having those conversations with your preceptors as well, because I think the more insight that you can get from people that you really respect, and asking those hard questions to them, like, why did you go there? Like, what was the point of you going there when you probably could have went somewhere else? And the thing that I kept in kind of the back of my mind was I didn't want to have to pay for school. And so some graduate assistantships that are out there where you don't get a tuition waiver, you just get pure money. Every 2 weeks or I think that's pretty much the standard. I don't know of anyone else that does anything differently than that. But you get this stipend. And some stipends are for 10 months, some are like 9 months. So make sure you know specifically how long are you going to work. Some schools, even though you're not being paid, they ask you to work over the break. I wasn't being paid at Ohio, so I wasn't expected to work. So pretty much from the time that the university closed, I went to Meigs. I think that's where I did my graduate assistantship, was at Meigs High School in Pomeroy, Ohio. And so I got them all set. I knew that we had one game because we had bad weather already, so it got canceled. I felt like that was probably the right thing to do, was to cover that one game and be there for it. And then I left. And I didn't go back until probably that Friday before classes started again. And I didn't feel bad about that. And I told them that they could call me if they needed me, but no one called me. And there was a history of that specific school. There had been 5, 6 different graduate assistants that were there before me. So that's another thing to consider when you're looking, is how long have they had that graduate assistantship and what kind of expectation is there? It's really important to understand the money perspective in terms of start looking on Craigslist, start looking at different places for apartments, just so you know in theory how much is it going to cost to live there, because you could really, really want to go somewhere. I think of like New England states and out east specifically. They might offer you a tuition waiver, and you might get like $1,000 tuition, or a stipend rather, in addition to your tuition waiver. But that doesn't really cover much of anything. Whereas like with Connor and living in the Midwest, I was able to support myself on my stipend. So I could pay for my apartment. I had one roommate, but I was able to like live a pretty decent life. Now, I didn't buy like a lot of nice things. Like I literally bought the bare minimum and was very thankful that, I didn't have any crazy expenses. My car didn't break down and things like that. I was able to without any debt. That's something that you really need to consider is when you're looking at these different programs, how much money are they giving you? So that's what actually, like Connor and I, we had that conversation, right? When Connor was looking at these schools, and I think that kind of sparked probably this talk right here is that name recognition schools. So I think of these like Big Ten schools and SEC schools, phenomenal schools, and by no means degrading them or saying anything bad about them in terms of the quality of education you might receive. But I've known from past experiences that my friends that went there, they went and they worked. They worked long hours. They didn't work in that true traditional, and Connor, correct me if I'm wrong, it's still 20 hours, right? You work on average each week, 20 hours per week. I had to log my hours when I was a grad student. I believe that's the case for Connor because I have to do that as a doctorate student. I have to do that every 2 weeks to say this is however many hours I'm working. And some schools really keep you at that. Like if I worked over an average of 20 hours a week, I actually got in trouble. I was told to go home or leave. And what that means is that they want to make sure that it's a work-life balance and you are there as a graduate assistant. You're not being paid like a traditional full-time staff member. So you shouldn't have those same expectations. Although that's easier said than done, and there's definitely parts like during the season, Connor is going to work more than 20 hours a week. We just know that's going to happen. But we also know that there's going to be times where he's not going to work, such as over break. Our staff and our faculty, I think, have a pretty good understanding at ISU that you're not being paid during that time. So you're going home. You're going to be spending that time with your family, your friends, or doing anything other than working. Ohio is the same way. So that school that you're exploring, are they going to have those same expectations? Are they going to allow you to go home? Are they going to allow you to not work during that time that you're not being paid? I also think another thing to consider when you're looking at this, other than the cost of living and the finances of that, is also looking at the alumni base. Are the people that are graduating from there, are they finding jobs? And my understanding with post-professional, as a part of their KD accreditation, I believe that's something that they have to keep up on, and they have to maintain and track who has this employment. And at Ohio, I believe they have I think it was like a 98%, or it was very, very high. So meaning the people that are graduating from those programs are actually getting jobs, because you wouldn't want to go to a program that you're spending all this time and money to get your master's degree or your doctorate, and you're not getting that. The one bad thing about this, and when I say bad, I mean we just don't know the outcomes of the doctorate in athletic training quite like what we do with a post-professional master's degree. So that is something that I'm sure Connor can even share with you, that's what we talk about a lot in our doctorate and athletic training program at ISU is the value and the worth. We're still discovering that. We're still, particularly at ISU, we've only had one cohort graduate. Temple, Idaho, and AT Still, we haven't graduated a lot of people from these programs. So that's why some people would consider it a little bit more of a risk to know that. So that's something that I looked at when I was trying to decide if I wanted a graduate assistantship or not at Indiana State was, did I want to live that lifestyle again? And did I want to be able to have my tuition reimbursed? I just ended up seeing an online program was probably something that was more fitting for my time in my life. But I also will say the best time of my life, and I feel like the time that I grew up the most and learned the most about myself was when I was in Ohio, when I was 4 hours away. So I know that that's a lot, but I really do think that distance, the money, the type of money they're giving you in terms of that tuition reimbursement, or is it pure cash? And then also the workload expectation, that's all the things that you have to consider. And if you're wanting to work with a Division I sport, you might have to realize you might be working more than that 20 hours. potentially if your university's not backing you. And also, your coaching staff might expect that. There might be expectations from people that are beyond the athletic training or the athletic program that, you know, control your money. They might want to work you more hours than what you feel comfortable with, and because you're also going to school at the same time.
Thanks for all that insight. I think another to consider is kind of what you had mentioned about being able to confide in others and get perspectives from people that have firsthand encounters. That really helped me out a lot with my process, and I know that's something that you mentioned, so I just wanted to highlight that before we moved on.
Definitely. And I find that the time after the interview, when you guys go out and get drinks afterwards, or you go out and you have dinner, make sure that you pull those individuals that are in that role aside. Absolutely, Connor. I can't stress that more than anything, because they're the ones that are, you would hope, aren't going to lie to you. They're going to tell you what your life's probably going to be like. And that could be good or bad. And that's what I found out at the places that I didn't end up going, was that was not for me. And that was okay. That was okay. But you have to know what's right for you. And sometimes we don't know what's right for us until we get in those situations. So going back to, if there's somewhere that you've always been interested in, you thought, you know what, my GPA or my GRE scores, or there might be something that's holding you back, the worst thing that can happen is that they say no, and you wasted some time with your application and a little bit of time with your like just the whole interviewing process and things like that. But that's never a bad thing, in my opinion. I think getting lots of different interview experiences, that's not a bad thing.
I know you briefly just mentioned interviews a second ago. I think we use that as a good segue for you to kind of touch on what that interview process has been like for you at both OU and then at ISU as well.
Yeah, so when I was at Ohio, we actually, it was during a snowstorm, and so there were supposed to be a lot more people in this interview than what ended up being. So there was about 100 people that applied for 26, or I think maybe it was 27 positions at Ohio. And so I knew that when I went in there, I had to stand out. And I just came back from my interview at Old Dominion. And so I knew that I had to make myself unique. And after leaving Ohio, I was a little bit more reserved, or excuse me, when I came to Ohio and I was reflecting on my interview with Old Dominion, I kind of already could tell the things that I didn't do so well. So I knew that I wanted to just be very bold, and I wanted to show my personality, and I was pretty sure that's where I wanted to go. So I just said that during my interview, and I talked about how I saw myself being there. And I think that through the application process, that's one of the things that they look for, is who actually wants to be there. They're going to ask you questions about your past and the different sports you worked and your ambitions, but I also think that they need to see who you are truly as a person. They don't want someone to just come in and tell them what they think they want to hear. I think they really need to hear your true voice, and I think that that's important. So you're honest with them of who they're going to get, and you also ask that of them, that they're honest with you, because you don't want to be walking into a graduate assistant position or to graduate school thinking that you are, very comfortable with them, and then they turn and they're completely different during academic year than they were when they were interviewing you.
What would you say, were there different styles of interviews since you've been through a couple different ones, or do they all kind of have the same general characteristics?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of different ones. So where at Old Dominion, graduate assistants interviewed us, doctoral students. So actually, if I remember right, my current professor, Dr. Powell at NESD, actually interviewed me when I was interviewing at Old Dominion. And so it was a lot of one-on-one and then group. And then from our program director, like the program director at Old Dominion actually interviewed me. And I went into a room and actually, we had like this one-on-one conversation. Whereas at Ohio, it was a panel of 5 PhD students and faculty members, like a mixture. And Dr. Starkey wasn't even in on the overall interviews. He just kind of oversaw the the beginning process and then the debriefing process. So some program directors, I think, want to have a heavy hand on it, and other professors kind of take that slack of knowing what they want to see, and they have a feel for the people they want in their program. So I think you need to be ready to be able to speak with all the way from current master's students or doctoral students, all the way up to the program director to the dean. So when I was interviewing for my PhD program at Kansas, I even met with the chair of the department. So I've heard of other people having to meet with even higher ups, but I just met with the program director. So.
Thank you for that insight, Lucas. Could you touch a little bit on what the actual academic side of grad school is like, and then also how to balance that with a graduate assistant position?
Yeah, so when I was at Ohio, I found it pretty easy, actually, in terms of being able to balance between the two. I didn't feel like that heavy of a load. It was just really my anatomy class, because we had cadaver dissection. So I wasn't really strong in anatomy and physiology, as strong as what I wanted to be. That's one of the reasons why I picked Ohio. And so I spent a lot of time in cadaver dissection labs and things like that. But honestly, my research was the thing that really kept me the busiest. And so I think that that's something also that you need to consider is, do you want to do research as a master's program? You're probably going to have to do something in terms of research. If you're doing a doctoral program like the DAT, like Connor and I are doing, you're definitely going to be doing research, and you're doing not just one project, but you're doing 2 projects. So you really have to decide how heavy focus in research you want to go, and understand that the heavier research focus you go, obviously the more challenging it's going to be. So some master programs, even you have to defend a thesis. You have to go through the entire IRB application process. So that really, I think, puts a heavy layer to all the other coursework that you have, like what we have at NASA. We have regular weekly meetings and classes that we're taking and have assignments on top of our outside research. That's really, there's no time that's really being accounted for it in terms of, it just has to occur. So I feel like we're lucky at NASA because we actually have bi-weekly or weekly meetings with our professor that keep us on track. When I was in Ohio, I didn't really have that. It was like, okay, this is what you need to get done, and you have like a month or so to get that done. And some people don't, and that's why some people graduate and some people don't. Some people, I think at Ohio, they probably had to take like a summer class or something like that to finish up, but they eventually graduated. But it really just depends on the university. I find NASA pretty reasonably challenging in terms of like, if you are able to balance your work and you're able to kind of get a feel for when you're going to have time throughout the week, you're going to be okay. But it really, I think it goes down to also how and how precise you're going to be with your scheduling. So you can really make graduate school, I think, as successful or not as successful as you want. I had a lot of classmates that went out to the bars and they graduate school, but yeah, I did. So.
All right, I've got one kind of guided question that I'll you to just add any final thoughts. But going back to like stipends and things of that nature, just knowing the different places you've applied to, if you were giving recommendations to the students listening, what would you say would be like a fair stipend or compensation that they should be looking for, or maybe an average that you noticed when you were applying, or from what you've heard today?
Yep. So what I noticed was the kind of the norm was about $12,000 roughly. I think that that's going to be kind of a general sense, 11 to 12. They're going to give you enough so you're not eating just peanut butter and pancakes like the entire time, but at the same time, they're not going to be giving you so much money that you can go out and actually, I would say, like have a car payment and have an apartment payment without you living with several other individuals. And I know that that's what a lot of my classmates had to do. So I've seen other places where they offer like 17,000 or 22,000, but they also don't give you a tuition waiver. And so something you have to consider as well is that if you're out of state, you are costing them a significant amount of money. So if you were to go to graduate school out of state without having that reimbursement, you'd be paying a lot of money. I mean, it's like, I don't know, $400 or $500 per credit hour in some places. So that's something you have to consider, is that if you're wanting to go out of state and you knew that you were wanting to go out of state, you might have to be okay with taking a little bit lower stipend if you're wanting to go there, just because the school, they have a certain dollar amount, and there's really not a lot of negotiating that I've noticed on that. It's kind of, it is what it is. So that might not be the case for all schools, but I just know that if you're not comfortable with what they're advertising on there, you have to maybe ask about, are there different extra positions or extra things that you can do? So like in NASA, you can work different camps. And I know a lot of the graduate students work camps to make some extra money. But if you work at a school where a lot of the faculty, or the staff rather, they take those camps on and they don't give that to the graduate assistants, that might take away some extra money making opportunities. And also, are you going to have to take summer classes or not? At Ohio, I had to take summer classes. I wasn't being paid during that whole time. I'm trying to remember when it started, but there was like a few weeks that I had to go without a paycheck. So I would just say, at the very least, make an Excel spreadsheet of all these different places that you're potentially looking at, and also look at different schools in that state or in that region. So like in GLATA, if you know that you're wanting to look at a couple of different ones throughout the Midwest, get those and have that, so you have that idea of, okay, is this fair or not? And then if you're lucky enough to be able to interview, that's when you can have that side conversation, say, to that person that you're interviewing for their position, is this realistic? Is this fair? Am I going to have to ask my parents for money? Am I going to have to take out a large loan? I know the answer was yes for a lot of my classmates, but they also wanted to be able to have a little bit different lifestyle that I did when I was in graduate school. So a lot of things to consider, hopefully. Some things to consider in terms of the finances, but I also ask you not to get hung up on just the pure finances of it, because you want to have faculty and you want to have an experience that will really prepare you and kind of set you apart from others. So there has to be a fine balance between the two.
Could you also touch really briefly on the different places that you can look for graduate postings, like on websites or through word of mouth or hearing from faculty or program directors?
Absolutely. I think that the number one place that you should go to, and if you should be a member of NATA, go to the Career Center and have that alert set up so that it's sending to you. I've also found some through my own research that I'm doing through Indeed.com. And then I think word of mouth is huge, and also Facebook. Being friends or liking other programs' pages. I know even if you didn't graduate from that university, it might be something to consider. Some schools are okay with that, and that they allow kind of anyone to follow them, and some schools maybe be private. But that's not just true for graduate assistantships, but also just for general positions that are open. LinkedIn, there's a lot of different websites, but I think Facebook is probably the one that I see the most often, and word of mouth in terms of let people know where you're applying. Be very vocal about, I'm trying to apply to this place, and if you don't already have a connection there, we're very, very small, extremely small. That's what I found over the years. The odds that you know someone who maybe knows someone else who graduated from there, who currently teaches or has taught there in the past, they're pretty high. So just be diligent about that, and don't ever hesitate to email someone and say, I'm really and this is really for the sophomores and the juniors. I was interested in going to LSU for a short amount of time, and I asked the program director at NATA conference, what do I need to do for that? And he was like, you need to start applying at the very, very beginning of your senior year, and you need to express your interest. So juniors and sophomores, it's not too far-fetched to start having those email conversations with the program directors and the faculty at that university, just so you know their expectations and what they're looking for, especially in coursework. That's something that I didn't talk about, Connor, and I just want to bring up is make sure that you know from the beginning of your schooling what coursework are they looking for. So if they want someone that has a physics background and you have not taken physics and you're like, yeah, I want physics, you have to make sure that you're doing that sooner rather than later, because senior year, in my opinion, is not when you want to be starting to add those classes. That's when you need to be preparing for the BOC. And for those that are in the entry-level master's programs, and maybe they're also wanting extra classes, I'm not even sure how that works, but something to consider most certainly. If you're an entry-level master's student, you might not have that coursework. So just, I think mapping out your coursework and mapping out your career path, there is never too early of a time to start, because that might change, and it most certainly did for me. I think that's true for you, Connor. I think that probably a year ago today, you weren't really sure where you're going to end up, but you just have to be aware of what you want out of life, and then everything else I think kind of comes, and you'll kind of base all those other decisions that I talked about around that.
All right. Thank you, Lucas. Do you have any final comments or regards that you can think of as far as things we haven't touched on yet?
I don't think so. Other than just this is kind of a plug for the GLATA Student Senate alumni. Do not hesitate to reach out to us, because Dr. Games at Indiana State, myself, Alyssa McPherson, she's at IU. I could name so many individuals, but look on our website. I know that you keep that alumni base set up, because I keep getting emails for it. So don't hesitate to contact any of us. And I can say, from at least my perspective, I will talk with every single person that's in the Senate, and I'll come up with time to talk with you one-on-one, and just be kind of that person that listens to you. There's a lot of people that are out.
All right. Thank you, Lucas. Would you be all right with me throwing our contact information up on the screen really quick in case anyone wants to contact us with questions about today's talk?
Absolutely. That sounds great. Send me a quick email, and then we can even set up a time to chat on the phone or do a different form of communication, but I'll be more than happy to help.
I'll just throw that up really quick. So here's that contact information for all of you. Feel free to jot that down or take a picture, and if you ever need to reach out to Lucas or I, just shoot us an email and we'd be glad to chat with you. All right. Oh.
The void.
All right, Lucas, I just want to say thank you for your time today and sharing some insight with all the students on what they can look for as they prepare to apply to grad schools.
My pleasure. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you.